Everyone for joining us tonight. My name is Jackie Camp, and I'm a planner with the county's Planning and Development Department. I'm joined here by Carmen Bishop, as well as Bill Malin from, we're all in the Zoning Administration Division of the Planning and Development Department. Tonight, I'll be providing information on a potential zoning ordinance amendment for battery energy storage systems. A few housekeeping items I mentioned before. This meeting is being recorded, and we will post the recording as well as the slides to the project webpage later this week. At the end of the presentation, we'll have some time for questions and sharing of any feedback on the topic. You can also add comments and questions to the chat, and we can answer those at the end. And lastly, please keep your microphone on mute, as mentioned, until called upon. We also have posted on the project webpage the draft text and a summary document. It gives additional background and rationale for the proposed new standards and permissions. Okay. This slide provides our project timeline. We presented to the board's Land Use Policy Committee and the Planning Commission's Infrastructure Committee in January to give an introduction to battery energy storage systems. And we did a similar presentation during community meetings like the one this evening in April. In June, we presented to those same committees the draft text that we have posted and that we'll be talking about today, followed by, of course, what the meeting is for today, community meetings on the draft text. So same presentation as we gave to the committees. We had lunch and learn community meeting yesterday, and then tonight's evening meeting. And our goal is to have public hearings in the fall. This may depend on the feedback and the comments we receive, and if there's additional revisions and drafts that we will be working on, that schedule could be extended. So what is a battery energy storage system? It is a technology designed to store and manage energy for later use. It uses rechargeable batteries to store energy from the electrical grid and renewable energy sources like solar or wind power, which can make the electric grid more clean, flexible, and reliable. Because solar and wind can be inconsistent depending on the weather and time of day, BESS can store that surplus energy produced during high wind conditions and when the sun is out, and release that energy when needed. It provides a more stable energy supply, making renewable energy more viable, and can reduce reliance on fossil fuel-based power. For critical infrastructures such as hospitals and emergency services, BESS can provide essential backup during power outages. But one of the big advantages of BESS is its ability to store excess energy during off-peak hours and release it when demand spikes. So storing the electricity during periods of low demand when rates are cheaper and using it during peak demand when prices are higher can help lower electricity prices. We are showing this graphic because it shows the components of an electrical system with the inclusion of a battery energy storage system. It shows the batteries and all the associated components that are that work within the BESS container and along with it. The most used battery chemistry is the lithium ion battery, and these batteries are used in a variety of devices from cell phones to electric vehicles to large-scale BESS. The safety of lithium ion BESS is a common concern, especially given reports of BESS fires that have drawn public attention in other parts of the country. However, these incidents have also driven the industry to improve its understanding of the issues, develop more robust mitigation measures, codes, and standards, and update site designs. Some of the components that help operate the BESS can generate noise. Based on a noise study report provided to the county by an acoustical consultant, the large container units associated with battery energy storage systems and their accompanying cooling fans and condensing units can produce noise levels exceeding 90 dBA at the source. In addition, power conversion devices, which are what converts direct current into alternating current for integration into the power grid, can also contribute significantly to the overall noise and can exceed, according to the acoustical consultants, 80 dBA at the source. And while BESS offers several benefits to communities, their development often raises concerns related to safety, sound level, and visual impact. And that is why zoning and safety standards can help communities address and mitigate those concerns. For zoning purposes, battery energy storage systems can be either a principal use or an accessory use. Best that store power that is used solely by a home or business where the battery is located, such as the first two photos on the right, are typically accessory to the property's primary use. These systems can vary in size, ranging from as small as a residential circuit breaker to as large as outdoor heating and cooling equipment. Best as a principal use, as shown in the picture on the bottom right, could include systems that charge from and discharge directly into the electrical grid that support a large scale commercial use or systems that are integrated with wholesale energy generation, such as solar and wind facilities. The zoning ordinance standards that we're discussing today are specific for those principal use battery energy storage systems. Regarding existing zoning regulations, what we have today, a proposed BESS facility would be part of the electrical distribution system and would be considered a light utility facility use in the zoning ordinance. So currently, a light utility facility is not allowed in the II, RA, and PCC districts. It is allowed by right in the I3 through I6 districts. It would require a special exception in all other districts. And for the P districts, except for the PCC, it would be required to be part of the development plan or would require a special exception. The BESS would not be subject to any use specific standards. So any kind of specific setbacks, it would be just what the underlying zoning district provides for setbacks or other types of use specific standards like special transitional screening and barrier requirements. Right now, only those come into play only when the use is adjacent to residential districts or residential uses. As best would be considered a light utility facility use in the zoning ordinance, staff's proposing a revision to the light utility facility definition to include large scale battery energy storage systems and to add a new definition for battery energy storage system large scale. The definition would define it with a specific capacity size threshold. The proposal provides a range for consideration that goes from an energy capacity of greater than 600 kilowatt hours to a max of 10 megawatt hours. Those systems with a maximum stored energy less than the principal use would then be considered an accessory use. The 600 kilowatt hour threshold comes from the National Fire Protection Association standard for energy storage, NFPA 855, and that requires additional safety standards when a BESS site has a maximum stored energy greater than 600 kilowatt hours. And then we put the higher range of 10 megawatt hours as that comes from Dominion's model ordinance for battery energy storage systems. However, we have found other thresholds found in the research that have included 1 to 2 megawatts, which is measuring power capacity versus stored energy. And even most recently, learned that Albemarle County, Virginia, even took a different approach and did not use either stored energy or power capacity, but went for a size threshold of square footage of the size of the containers. So that's also something that we're learning more about. Now we'll talk a little bit about proposed permissions and locations. Based on the rapidly evolving nature of the technology, potential noise impacts, safety considerations, and a review of other local government zoning standards for BESS, staff is proposing that large scale battery energy storage systems would not be permitted in residential districts, the PDH, PRC, PRM, or PCC districts unless it was co located with a substation or solar power facility, and that would only be allowed through an approval of a special exception. It would also not be permitted in the II district. A special exception would be required then for large scale BESS in all commercial districts, all industrial districts, and in the PDC and PTC districts. And Cynthia, I see your hand raised, and if you could just hold till the end, and I'll go to you first for your question. For setbacks, the use of setbacks can provide both a visual barrier and mitigate noise and safety impacts. And based on the review of counties in Virginia with zoning standards specific for battery energy storage systems, as well as other resources that we have found, and such as the county's use specific standards for data centers, which have similar noise concerns. As best, setbacks are being proposed to include a 100-foot setback from all property lines and a 200-foot setback from a residential district or residential use. And then we have, of course, ranges around those distances for consideration. We also are proposing considering requiring an adequate public water supply for fire protection. We have a proposal for fences or walls that are an integral part of a large scale BESS, allowing them to exceed the maximum fence or wall height that's currently allowed in the zoning ordinance with a maximum height of 8 feet. So, for example, in some districts, a fence or wall is limited to 4 feet in a front yard. With this proposal, the applicant could exceed that 4 foot requirement and install a fence with a maximum height of 8 feet. This fencing standard is separate from transitional screening requirement that we'll talk about here on the next slide. We are also proposing that BESS would require an emergency operations plan that outlines procedures and requirements for the safe operation of the BESS, including how equipment and systems will be safely shut down under emergency conditions, procedures to follow in case of a fire, and information related to drills and training of local first responders. Lastly, a decommissioning plan proposed to be required since lithium ion batteries are considered a hazardous waste. The project owner would be responsible for managing them appropriately. An application would be required to include a decommissioning plan, which describes the timeline and manner in which the facility will be decommissioned and the site restored to a condition similar to it before the BESS was established. We are also still learning more about a financial security package requirement that would go along with the decommissioning plan, which may be proposed in a preceding draft. Regarding landscaping screening and barrier requirements, staff's proposing requiring a more intensive transitional screening for BESS than would be currently required. The proposal adds BESS to the solar power facility row in Table 5108.2 of the zoning ordinance, which requires a type 3 transitional screening. So this is a 50-foot wide tree barrier or tree screening, and barriers D or E, which are 6-foot, require a 6-foot wall of brick or architectural block or solid wood or otherwise architecturally solid fence adjacent to single family uses, and a type 2, which would be a 35-foot wide planting of trees screening with barriers D or E adjacent to other residential uses. The draft text also adds a requirement for type 1, which is a 25-foot wood wide planting for solar power facilities and BESS when adjacent to the other uses listed in those columns, such as public, institutional, and community uses, commercial uses, and craft beverage establishments, in addition to the already existing barrier requirements of D or E. The transitional screening and barrier requirements could be within the required setbacks. Another section of the zoning ordinance pertains to specific submission requirements for a special exception review for specific uses. This is where the details of what information we would like submitted would be listed as part of the special exception review. So along with the specific requirements for the emergency operation plan and decommissioning plan, we are also proposing that the design and proposing a requirement for a noise study that would demonstrate that the design and operation would comply with the county's noise ordinance. As mentioned earlier, we're continuing to learn about the financial security package that may go along with a decommissioning plan, and you may see that in a preceding draft. This slide just provides an overview of some potential other approvals that may be required for a BESS development. So when applicable, BESS facilities may require a state corporation commission review and approval. And those that are a public utility facility or a public service corporation facility supporting the electrical grid would require a 2232 review. And that's a public hearing process review with the comprehensive plan. Another potential approval is a siting agreement where an applicant and the Board of Supervisors could negotiate an agreement. It would also require a public hearing process and could be paired up with the 2232 public hearing process. So under the Virginia Code, a siting agreement could include terms and conditions such as mitigation of project impacts, financial compensation to the county to address capital needs. And lastly, there are requirements through the building, fire, and electrical codes that a project would also need to meet. Jurisdictional research for this zoning ordinance amendment has included a review of Virginia jurisdictions that have incorporated standards specifically for battery energy storage systems in their zoning ordinances, including the counties listed here and other resources such as Dominion Energy's model ordinance for BESS, among other resources reviewed. The slide provides an overview of the jurisdiction's zoning ordinance standards for BESS compared to the Fairfax County staff proposal that's there on the far right column in yellow. So that concludes our slides for tonight. We've been receiving feedback and anticipate receiving additional comments. And comments can be emailed to me at any time at my email here noted on the slide. It's also noted, listed on the project webpage. If you can't find it, it's there. We'll be reviewing all the comments and feedback that we receive. We may be making revisions to the proposed text based on that feedback. I have the project webpage listed here. Like I mentioned at the beginning, we'll be posting the recording of tonight's meeting and as well as yesterday afternoon's meeting, along with the slides sometime this week. And then I also included the link and website for address for signing up for email updates. And you can also reach that through the county's webpage. That will give you emails when there's a committee meeting or a hearing for any zoning ordinance amendment. Okay, well, I know that we at least have one question, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Let me stop sharing so I can see everybody that's here and hands raised. Cynthia, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I just had two questions. One, I'm trying to clarify is that when you say the 600 kilowatt hour to 10 megawatt, is that you're still debating what the minimum will be, or is it going to be 600 is the minimum and then 10 megawatts is maximum, and then there's going to be something else after that as an ordinance? I'm just a little confused. Can you clarify that for me?
Yes, great question. That is a range for consideration during this process. So we're looking for feedback on that range. So whatever is then approved by the board would be the whatever how we would define a large scale battery energy storage system. So if they chose greater than 600 kilowatt hours, then anything greater than 600 kilowatt hours would be considered a large scale battery energy storage system and would need to abide by the standards of the zoning ordinance. If it fell with underneath that that 600 greater than 600 kilowatt hours, it would be considered an accessory battery energy storage systems. But as
That's
I mentioned, oh, sorry.
No, no, I'm just, okay, that clarifies it. I just am very concerned because 10 megawatts is quite a significant increase over 600 kilowatt hours. And even as your pictures demonstrated, the equipment can be significantly larger. I'm just a little shocked at that kind of spread, because if it falls under that, then what you're saying is it's just a light utility. And so there's less restrictive means, and since they wouldn't then fall under any need to have a special exception, then they don't have to have a noise study, even though they could be rather large and noisy if we're talking about 10 megawatts as a minimum.
Yeah, 10 megawatt hours is what the proposal is. So yeah, that's we're looking for feedback. And as I mentioned when I was talking on that slide, that for a zoning ordinance to kind of have these kinds of energy capacity and storage size for is a unique thing. And that's why it was interesting that we recently learned about Albemarle County, who's taking a different approach to it on a more kind of land use side perspective on the square footage size. So still learning more about that. And of course, would love to hear have any comments received regarding that range as well, or any other way to define best.
If I might add in there, so on the range, it's kind of two things at this point for staff. We are still, as Jackie said, we're still learning more about how to define a principal use of BESS and where to draw that line. And so we're still doing some research on that topic. The 10 megawatt hours was from the Dominion Model Ordinance. So that was, I think, the largest that we have seen in research. So correct me if I'm wrong, Jackie. But so that's kind of the range that we are exploring within, as well as other ways that could be done. So partly that range there is, yes, we are still researching, and we absolutely appreciate, hearing from people and what the feedback is. And then the other issue is that when we do put the amendment forward for authorization and consideration by the Planning Commission and the board, we do often include a range for their consideration. And so when we bring it forward, there could be a range in that document as well. And what that's doing is that's just giving the board some flexibility within, here's a number, like whatever staff is recommending, but here's some range, sometimes lower, sometimes higher, that's offered for their flexibility during the public hearing process and consideration.
But just let me clarify one more thing then, because then if we're talking about these ranges and being so loud, are so different, are you also taking into account that the noise study then that was done, is that based on these 10 megawatt systems, or was that based on a lesser system? And so how would you determine, if you say 10 megawatts, then they don't fall under any kind of special exception? They'd be more lenient if they're under 10 megawatts. So there wouldn't be any need or anything in the ordinance that would require a noise study, which, by the way, I was a little confused why it's only special exception, and probably considering data centers, they do have to have a noise study regardless.
Right. And just to clarify, so any use in the county needs, no matter what, needs to abide by the noise ordinance. So the county has a noise ordinance that has noise maximum decibels that if you go over, then you're not in compliance with the county standards. So there's, of course, that. The noise study requirement for battery energy storage systems would be required for any large scale battery energy storage system, which would also all require a special exception. So no large scale battery energy storage systems, as whatever it is that we define it as, would be allowed by right. All of them would have to go through a special exception approval process and have a noise study requirement under this proposal. Hope that answered your question, Cynthia, but please feel free to reach out if you want to chat more about it. I'm happy to jump on a call tomorrow or anytime this week and chat. Okay, David.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, so 2 questions. Well, actually, I guess a comment. I think Cynthia's right. I'm much more comfortable with the 600 kilowatt hours, and I think one of the main reasons for that is the threshold set by NFPA 855. And since the biggest threat of these things, the day-to-day threat is noise, but the existential threat is a fire. And I think that you really have to pay attention to the fire codes. And 600 kilowatt hours is kind of the cutoff point on the fire code. So I think that's a really good natural break point. The other question I have, I'm a little bit unclear as to what the rules are for a BESS attached to a solar farm. So suppose somebody, I'll give you 2 situations. Suppose somebody builds a solar farm and puts a 50 megawatt hour BESS on it. Now, is that a supplementary use or is that a principal use? As far as your zoning stuff is concerned.
So if you had a large scale BESS and you had a solar power facility as defined in the ordinance as a principal use, those would be each principal uses that would have to abide by the zoning ordinance standards for each use.
Okay, good. So
Okay.
somebody can't build a 50 megawatt hour BESS and put a little 2 foot by 2 foot solar cell on top and say it's a solar farm and therefore I get to go anywhere. Okay.
No, the solar power facility has to be a principal use. So there's a review of that and it has specific standards and a special exception approval process in districts. So it would need to meet that principal use requirement. And then the BESS would have
even though the BESS is just there because of the solar farm, in theory, it would also be called a principal use.
Right.
Okay, because I worry about somebody putting up an 80 megawatt hour BESS and then going down to Harbor Freight and buying a little solar panel. Okay.
Sure.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you. No, I like the proposed changes. They are wonderful. I do strongly recommend the 600 kilowatt hour limit between principal use, well, for when you got to look at things seriously, because there is a great deal of difference there between 600 kilowatt hours and 10 megawatt hours. So I appreciate you have to give a decision maker something to make a decision on. However, that is a major, that's a major break point in all the international fire codes. So.
And I think you're right, David. I just want to interject here because Dominion's standard, quote unquote, that's a private company, that's a utility company. That is not a national recognized standard. So I appreciate that they go to 10 megawatts, but I don't think we should be basing our zoning ordinance on something like that.
Yeah, R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company said I should smoke a pack of cigarettes a day.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, thanks.
Of course. Thank you for the question and for the feedback. Any other questions or comments? Okay, well, as mentioned, feel free to reach out to any of us here at ZAD, Zoning Administration Division. They'll get you to me, of course, and I'll, I'll answer any question I can and can discuss it more if needed on a call. Thanks for joining us tonight. Keep checking the webpage and check in as needed. Good night, everybody.